Ställa frågor, få svar, alternativa vägar mot krafterna som styr, expandera våra tankar från Sverige till resten av planeten jorden och bortom detta universum. Detta är Från jorden till universum med din host Robin Maxic. Welcome all viewers for another podcast. Today's genre and subject is alternative history. Today's program will be a mixture of actual historical events and a mixture of fictionalized storytelling written by myself. The name of this alternative history pod is called 3942, meaning that this story is set between the years 1939 till 1942 during the Second World War. Chapter 1. A Man from the Future. It was 11 p.m. December 1st, 1938, the Black Forest of Baden-Wurttemberg, Southwestern Germany. A regular two-truck patrol unit is driving through the pitch-black forest when suddenly a bright blue ball of light is seen emitting out from deep within the forest to the left. The truck stops and the men and the dogs deploys to investigate what it is. As the soldiers enters the forest, the ball of light slowly fades away. As they finally reach the point of origin, they see before them 5 well-dressed men, each one carrying a briefcase. The soldiers surround them, shouting out in German, "Hands up! Hands up!" One of the 5 men in the middle calmly lights a cigarette as the dogs bark viciously towards them and speaks. In German, "We bring forth knowledge to win the war." The cigarette-smoking man sits in a grey interrogation room and calmly waits for the interrogator. Suddenly, the door opens up and a black uniformed SS officer arrives, carrying with him the cigarette-smoking man's briefcase. He begins talking and says, "I am SS Gruppenführer Karl Wolf. I was told you and your group could help us win a war. We've tried to open your briefcase, but we cannot. No identifications, documents, or papers. I am assuming you are all spies." The captured man responded back in German, "My name is Alfred Richtmann. My men and I are scientists. What we each one has with us in this briefcase will change this world forever. If you will allow me to open my briefcase, I will show you something no other human in this time period have never seen before." The SS Gruppenführer hands over the briefcase to Richtmann, who turns it around, hunches forward with his face close to it, and into a small opening, where a scanning device appears and scans his 2 eyes. A small click is heard, and the briefcase is opened up. Richtmann opens it completely and reveals inside several documents and one small black box, big enough to fit in a grown man's hand. He picks it up and speaks. "You see, SS Gruppenführer Karl Wolf, we come from the future, and what I have in my hand is something we call a hologram. It is a small computer that holds a mass amount of information. I give you the future." Richtmann slides aside the briefcase and opens up the box, and immediately pops out a dark blue-shaped holographic image of Earth. He puts it down on the table and moves through several files stored on the hologram until he finds a file called "Our World and Tomorrow." The file is played up and begins showing the coming Second World War, a digital overview map of the entire scenario, along with old footage where Germany eventually loses the war, the dropping of the atomic bombs, the Cold War, the dropping of the hydrogen bombs, fighter jets, rockets, the moon landing, newspapers, and all the way to the middle of the 21st century. The 5 men and their briefcases are sent directly to Berlin, where the Führer has already been informed of the situation. Doors open up to the Reich Chancellor by the 2 SS guards. The 5 men from the future, led by SS Gruppenführer Karl Wolff, entered where before them stood the Führer himself, Adolf Hitler, looking through the large window over Berlin. The SS Gruppenführer Karl Wolff saluted the Führer and spoke. "My Führer, I bring forth the men we captured in the Black Forest." The SS guards closes the doors behind them. Richtmann and his team stood in shock and awe, but tries to hide it as Hitler turns towards them. He begins speaking as he slowly walks forward towards them. "Welcome, gentlemen. I was told about an amazing story, something out of a science fiction novel. The 5 men were captured, believed to be spies, turned out to be 5 German scientists from the far future, and are here now to help us win a war. Who of you is Alfred Richtmann?" "I am, my Führer," replied Richtmann. "Tell me, Herr Richtmann, from which year do you come from?" the Führer asked. "The year 2025, my Führer." "And in your time, does the Reich still exist?" The other 4 men felt a slight unease as they looked at Richtmann, who almost stuttered as he was about to speak, but held it together and replied. "No, my Führer, you lead Germany into the Second World War at September 1st, 1939, and is eventually defeated in 1945 after heavy losses against the Soviet Union." "Am I captured?" he asked Richtmann. "No, you are successful in escaping to Argentina," Richtmann replied. "Europe becomes communist?" Hitler asked. "No, only the East. The West becomes capitalist," Richtmann replied. "I was told you have a box that holds information of your future world." "Yes, my Führer. If you allow me to show you, you will then have the entire world in your hands," Richtmann said. And as he did, he was allowed to walk over to Hitler's desk, where he puts down the briefcase, scans his eyes again, opens the briefcase up, picks out the black box, puts it onto the desk, and plays up the recording of the coming future, and says, "My Führer, I bring you the future." Chapter 2, 1939. At the top-secret Nazi super-weapons testing site at Peenemünde in northeastern Germany have the Nazis for the last 6 months tested and constructed several jet and rocket propulsion prototypes with a staggering success rate that have nearly become supremely perfected. On the 6th of February, the first V-3 rocket is launched into orbit. On the 10th of February, the first perfected fighter jet is launched. On the 14th of February, the laser is created and weaponized immediately. On the 16th of February, the laser shields to be used by soldiers in the Wehrmacht are created. On the 20th of February, the first intercontinental jet bomber is launched. February 21st, the first stealth jet fighter and bomber is launched. By the 21st of July, has the entire German military been updated in secret with 21st century weaponry. Having been given all the information from the future time travel team about the events of World War II, Hitler orders for the V-3 rockets to target all airfields and military installations in Poland as soon as they declare war. Case White. At 0100 am on September the 1st, 1939, the Second World War begins. The superior German army totally annihilates the Polish army without losing a single soldier. The fleet of the Kriegsmarine of the German Reich fires upon the port city of Danzig, now in the control of Poland. Area and city that the Führer has wanted for years to be part of the Reich. The new Oberpanzers crushes the Polish army's cavalry. Reports reaches London and France and its other allies about the German super weapons being used against the Polish military, one being called laser weapons, along with super fast airplanes unable to be shot down. On September the 3rd, the Allies declares war on Germany. Hitler immediately ignores their demands and launches V-3 rockets and a mass fleet of fighter and bomber jets over France and the UK against key military naval, air and regular bases. The French and English Air Force are shocked to see the new super Luftwaffe fighters as they engage them and eventually loses battle after battle. By September the 3rd, Poland sends a message to Berlin for full capitulation as nearly their entire military have been annihilated. By September 4th, as nearly all the military vessels, bombers and fighter planes in and around the French and British coastlines been annihilated. Realizing the German inability to lose and their surprising supremacy in the air with their massive superior technology, the Allies offers a peace treaty to Hitler. An officer comes in to the Führer's chancellery and says, "My Führer, I have a telegram directly from London." The officer hands it to Hitler, who reads it and then speaks to his assembled commanders. "What does it say, my Führer?" Hermann Göring asked. The Führer replied, "Ha! The British and the French are offering a peace treaty. I say never! With what I have now at my disposable way, I will crush them before me until they and everyone else lies crushed beneath the boots of the Reich's forces." As the conditions of surrender and the peace treaty signed between Warsaw and Berlin on September the 4th, the already laid out plans for the Nazi concentration camps are quickly laid out. Constructions begins right away by the prisoners of war and the rounded up undesirables. A far sinister way of exterminating the enemies of the Reich has been set. The new masterminds behind the final solution are the Nazi time travelers, the so-called men from the future. Having conquered Poland in less than a week, Hitler orders the Operation Weserübung, the invasion of Denmark and Norway, to be launched on October 1st. To counter this massive invasion force in Norway, the Allies, led by the British under the newly elected Prime Minister Winston Churchill, dispatches a massive invasion fleet of Norway to be used as a defensive force against the Reich's forces. Knowingly of the future outcome of the war, Hitler orders his Wolfpacks, the super submarines, and his Kriegsmarine and super air force, the super Luftwaffe, to be used against the Allied Naval Task Force. As the Allied Task Force of over 80,000 men is transported across the North Atlantic Sea, the Reich strikes. It's no battle, it's more of a slaughter. The German Navy and Air Force totally annihilates the Allied Task Force at the sea. Nearly 99% of the entire Allied Task Force is sunk. Nearly 80,000 men are killed. The rest who survives return back in shame, back to the United Kingdom, where Churchill orders the country to be prepared for the coming invasion of the mighty nation. In less than a month after the first invasion day of Denmark, followed by Norway, both countries have fallen into the hands of the Reich. With their future knowledge at hand, Hitler crushes all resistance in Denmark and Norway. Chapter 3, 1940. Blitzkrieg in Western Europe. The time had finally come. 10th of May, 1940. Fall Gelb. Case Yellow. The Third Reich, spearheaded by Superior Air Force and Panzer Division, invades simultaneously Holland, Belgium and Luxembourg with a total amount of 3,350,000 German troops. On May the 11th, the Third Reich reaches the Belgian-French border and begins the invasion of France. The already nearly defeated Allies are no match. The few pockets of resistance are met with the destructive might of the Reich. On May the 13th, French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud declares Paris an open city before resigning, and Marshal Henri-Philippe Pétain replaces him. On May the 14th, German forces enters Paris with crowds of Parisians in deep sadness. On May the 16th, Italy enters the war on the Axis side. On May the 17th, Pétain sends a message to Berlin about terms of surrender. A quick response is sent, and it's decided that the signing of surrender is to take place at Compiègne, the original site of the Great War Armistice Agreement. May the 18th, an armistice is signed inside the famous train cart where Vichy France is created and joins the Axis forces under the leadership of Pétain. With France secured in the Reich hands and only Britain left opposing the Reich, Hitler immediately orders the preparation for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of the British Islands. On May the 20th, 1940, Winston Churchill, the newly elected Prime Minister of the British Empire, delivers his most infamous speech to the nation and to the world. Even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. May 25th. The first V4 rocket is launched into orbit with a satellite by Germany, followed by two more, both carrying 21st century spy camera lenses. Fearing the worst, England prepares to battle the superior German military as it waits for the coming invasion. In the war room in Berlin, the Führer and the General Stab have assembled in the war room and are to commence the oversight of Operation Sea Lion. A high-ranking general of the Wehrmacht begins speaking. My Führer, men, Generalen, this is the finalized plan of Operation Sea Lion. As you can see before you, the map of the British Isles. Our satellite images taken recently shows that the Luftwaffe and our V3 rockets have utterly decimated their chances of counterattacking us. Yet there are most likely still ground forces and civilian conscripts ready to engage our forces as they arrive at the beachheads and in the major cities. Each army group will be launched in 3 waves. Army Group A will be led by Field Marshal Gert von Rundstedt. Naval ships in this group will embark from Ostend, Dunkirk, Calais, Boulogne and Le Havre. Army Group C will be led by Field Marshal von Lieb and will embark from Cherbourg in Normandy. Our airborne units will be airlifted from inside the Reichs by the intercontinental transport planes, which will also carry smaller numbers of vehicles and supplies. The ICTPs will be escorted by stealth fighters, intercontinental jet bombers, drones and fighter jets. Army Group C will disembark from Cherbourg as our air armada enters English space. Troops will be airdropped onto the following cities: Ramsgate, Dover, Bexhill, Brighton, Portsmouth, Ventnor, Southampton, Lyme Regis, Bristol, Gloucester, Oxford, Reading, Reigate, Rochester and Malden. The few remaining military fortifications left will be destroyed by fighter jets, drones and ICJBs. After an initial successful taking of the southern island, which will be taken completely in 5 days with some expected resistance, we will proceed towards the north, which we expect to fall within the next week. We expect a complete victory and total capitulation of the British and the Allies within 2 weeks. On June the 1st, Adolf Hitler, the Führer of the Reich, commences Operation Sea Lion. Having already surrounded the British islands by the wolf packs, there was no way of escaping it by sea to America or any other Allied territory before the invasion. At 0600 hours on the morning of June the 1st, embarked a 1 million manned armada towards the English coastline. Air raid sirens began playing as a thunderous rumble began echoing from the south across the English sky. first landing barges came upon the shores of southern England, they came under modest fire by few stationed forces, as most had been stationed further up north. The few stationed English forces along the beachheads became the first of many to witness firsthand the new German weapons. The Germans fired their laser weapons, cutting through anything and slaughtering the English forces, forcing them to immediately retreat further inland. As the first hour had come to pass, the news had become dire for the Allies, as the Germans had secured all the designated chosen beach landings across the southern coastline. At 10:15 a.m. it was clear. The German advancement was unstoppable. The Royal Air Force, the RAF, had been completely wiped out. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, were in complete control of the sky, and all the coastal ports were guarded by the German wolfpacks, the super submarines. London, 11 a.m. The few who were seen peeping out behind the window curtains as the SS and the Wehrmacht forces were heard approaching from the outskirts of London. The people listened patiently and in fright as the rumbling and marching noises were heard coming closer and closer. As the hour had finally become 11 a.m., the first Wehrmacht and SS forces entered London. Line after line of German soldiers, spearheaded by their panzer and armored divisions, passed through street after street, block by block, till they finally entered Trafalgar Square. Over at the U.S. Embassy, the staff and Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., the father of the future American President John Kennedy, watched carefully through the windows as he saw the first SS soldiers pass them by, followed by the Wehrmacht. Having lost most of its morale during the initial attacks of 1939, the British Army had been ordered to retreat out from the city to prevent any future damage of it. As the German forces finally arrived in London and moved towards key locations, the main one being Buckingham Palace, all the streets were deserted and not a person was seen in sight. As the city of London had nearly become fully occupied by the German forces, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt becomes the first highest ranking officer of the German military to enter Buckingham Palace. The German High Command immediately sets up a military headquarters in the palace. At 11:45 a.m., the German High Command in Berlin is notified that London lies now in complete German control. An officer speaks to the Führer with the message. Mein Führer, London has gefallen. London has fallen. The Führer slammed his right hand into his left hand palm and said, I have you now, Churchill. As the SS takes over the police force, they begin immediately instigating the Nazi racial laws. The Union Jack, the British flag, is removed, burned, and changed to the Nazi swastika flag. The Nazi flags and banners quickly engulf the buildings of occupied Britain. The city of London becomes immediately filled with propaganda materials, with giant posters of Adolf Hitler with the underlying text, Obedience to the Führer, obedience to the 1,000-year-old Reich, along with anti-Semitic posters with the underlying text saying, When you see them, report them. Aryan Englishmen and women, it's your duty to cleanse the Reich from all its enemies. The infamous David Star is implemented at once, as the SS had quickly acquired the registry of who was who in occupied Britain. The immediate layout of a wall that is to surround London is created and construction begins with the end of the week by forced labor from the local population. plan is to turn London into one giant controlled prison to ensure that the resistance will be able to infiltrate it and perform acts of vengeance against the Germans as it is enacted. By 0100 hours PM, the SS moves through London and begins arresting all remaining politicians in the city and rounds them up at the Parliament. As the arrested parliamentarians and lords arrive at the Parliament building, the sea of the Nazi flag rises above it and the Nazi banners hanging at each side of the wall around the entrance. Surrounded by a heavy military presence, both regular forces, panzer divisions and SS soldiers have set up checkpoints around it and along both ends of the London Bridge. The doors were closed, as the 650 MPs and 200 captured lords had all been rounded up inside the Parliament guarded by the SS soldiers. They all talk to one another, trying to figure out what is about to happen. And suddenly, the doors finally open up. The men silences, seeing before them a black uniformed SS officer, followed by two others, entering the room. The black-dressed SS officers looks at the MPs and lords. They all have a smug, superior, evil smile. When finally they stop in a militaristically organized way and turns toward them. I am SS Obergruppenführer Otto Kellermann. Welcome, gentlemen. As you know by now, your last war, as a glorious Luftwaffe have destroyed your precious RAF and totally demoralized your remaining armed forces. Your precious royal family and leader Winston Churchill has left you with your trousers down. All forms of rebellion against the forces of the Reich and the Reich itself will be met harshly. At what grounds do you have the authority to hold us here against our will? One MP asked. Another one shouted, You Nazi scum! Another one said, We won't obey scum like you. This is still English soil. SS Obergruppenführer Kellermann walks up to the older MP who just spoke out and spoke back to him with disdain. You won't obey, you say? But my dear MP, you are already complying. He then turns around towards the two other SS officers and speaks to them in German. Bring in the men. Kellermann walks away from the MPs and lords. The two walks up to the door and opens it. 20 SS soldiers storms into the room fast and lines up with their machine guns against the MPs and lords. One of the lords yells out, What's the meaning of this? Another one screams out, My God, they're going to kill us all! SS Obergruppenführer Kellermann stands at the far right of the lined up SS soldiers and pulls out his Luger pistol and screams out, Feuer! With the help of Oswald Mosley's brown shirts and the SS, along with Gestapo, they begin by 0300 PM searching and rounding up communists, journalists, Jews and others non-Europeans in and around London. In the skies above the city, drones and helicopters patrol the skies. SS and regular Wehrmacht soldiers watches the streets, suspicious of anyone. A highly efficient monitoring program within the headquarters of the Buckingham Palace. At 09:25 AM on the 17th of June the same year, the last stronghold in the Highlands, Scotland, falls to the victorious German forces. General von Manstein calls directly to Army HQ in Berlin, where the Führer awaits the news of the surrender. Mein Führer, this is General von Manstein. The British have surrendered. It appears it was a General Montgomery who led the last British front. He handed over to me personally his sidearm as he surrendered personally to me. Having finally defeated the Allies in Western Europe, Hitler returns back to Berlin as a victorious conqueror. A speech had been prepared to be held by the Führer himself in the Reichstag, live broadcasted to the people of the Reich and to the world. The Führer had stepped onto the platform and was ready to speak. The people in the audience of the Reichstag silenced and prepared to listen. German people, National Socialists, Sieg. Today at 11:25 a.m. I received a call from General von Manstein, who has been leading our great supreme German forces in the Scottish Highlands against the last British bastion of the British Islands that they had finally surrendered. The leader is a man called General Montgomery, who personally surrendered to von Manstein, and it is as of now that from forth this day shall be known as Victory over Britannia. The people shouted out a unanimous Heil over and over again, until the Führer himself slowly raised up his right arm for silence and to continue speaking. To those still wanting to fight us, I say to you that you are already doomed, for Germany has the supremacy on the ground, on the ocean and in the air. To those Aryan women and men still allied to Britain and its Commonwealth colonies, I say to you now, join our great Reich in the struggle for a better world, a world in true peace, for if you resist, we will destroy you like we did with France and Britain, who were already defeated by a supreme Luftwaffe in a matter of days in the year 1939. Long live Germany, long live National Socialism, long live the 1,000-year-old Reich. Heil! The people stood and shouted out once again a unanimous Heil, over and over again, as the Führer, with a determined mind, held a lookout over the mass of party members. The same day that the United Kingdom had finally fallen, a puppet government is installed in London, led by Oswald Mosley. A great military parade and nationwide celebration is created as the Führer has led the German people from victory to victory. On September the 11th, Axis forces, led by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel in North Africa, have successfully pushed back the Allies all the way to Egypt. On September 27th, Third Reich, the Empire of Japan, and Fascist Italy enters a military, political, and economic alliance called the Tripartite Pact. On November the 20th, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria joins the Axis forces. Chapter 4, 1941, Barbarossa. On April 1st, 1941, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia is invaded from three fronts by German, Italian, Hungarian, Romanian, and Bulgarian armed forces. On April 4th, Yugoslavia capitulates to Germany. On April 6th, the Kingdom of Greece is also invaded by the Reich and its allies. By April 9th, has the final British-led forces on the island of Crete surrendered to the heavy, overwhelming superior German forces. By the end of the month, the German plan for the invasion of the Soviet Union is completed. In the war room in Berlin, the Führer and the General Staff have assembled once again in the war room and are to commence the oversight of Operation Barbarossa. General Erich Marx stood before them and began speaking. By Führer, Männer, Generale, as you can see before you, we have a 2,900 kilometer front, where our advocated goal will be the AA line to the operational objective of the invasion of the Soviet Union. This goal would extend from the northern city of Arkhangelsk on the Arctic Sea to Gorky and Rostov, to the port city of Astrakhan at the mouth of the Volga on the Caspian Sea. The initial invasion will be part of two phases. Phase 1, air bombardment by fighter jets, stealth bombers, intercontinental jet bombers, drones and V-4 rockets onto vital military targets and rail tracks. The main vital objective will be their air force, where spy satellites has detected a total of 14,000 aircrafts along the European parts of the Soviet Union. Phase 2, a full ground offensive mainly by panzer divisions, followed by motorized divisions and infantry forces, a total of 500 divisions. As Phase 1 and 2 have been completed within a week, then we'll activate Phase 3, which will be the advancement and the taking of Moscow, Leningrad and Kiev. Moscow being the main objective due to its political and strategical point. Phase 4 will see our forces moving south towards the Caucasus area, mainly Stalingrad and Baku. We'll expect resistance once we've taken over most of the European part of the Soviet Union, but with our superior technology we will easily crush them. Our expected timeline for Soviet capitulation will be around 6 months. Operation Barbarossa. At 0100 am, the 22nd of June 1941, Operation Barbarossa is launched. A staggering total of 12,500,000 soldiers of the Reich and its Axis partners, an estimated 500 divisions, invades with it the largest invasion force in history. V-4 rockets along with stealth bombers, intercontinental jet bombers, armed drones and fighter jets are launched over the Soviet Union in the first wave, taking out completely their Soviet frontline army. the entire European stationed Navy and Air Force, along with completely demobilizing their railway systems. At the forefront of the ground forces are the infamous SS death squads, who locate and round up partisans and Jews. Over 5 million Soviet soldiers are captured during the first week of advancement, and all starved to death as part of the Great Hunger Plan. As the first reports come through of the rapidly declining situation, General Zhukov entered the situation room in Moscow, where Stalin, his right-hand man Beria, 5 other generals, 4 officers and 6 NKVD agents discussed the situation from the front. Everyone's eyes were at the fast-walking General Zhukov as he finally came up to the large table with a laid-out map of the entire front and saluted. Stalin spoke to him in a gentle manner. "Oh, General Zhukov, welcome. What news do you bring?" General Zhukov answered back. "Great Marshal Stalin, the Germans keep advancing across the entire front. They keep attacking us from the air with constant precision, as if they already know where we are. They are even on places where we are deeply camouflaged by the forest. They are firing from both panzers and ground troops photonic weapons from long distances. With this rapid advance, they will reach Moscow by the middle of July. I will still hold them back until the final battle has been won, but I am afraid this war is already lost, Comrade Stalin." "Counter-revolutionary," yelled Berina. The generals and officers stood in shock by what they had just heard, while the NKVD agents and Berina looked at him with great hate. Stalin took a puff from it and replied, "General Zhukov, thank you for your opinion, but I do warn you that if you come with a defeatist mind, I will have you shot." Zhukov replied, "Great Marshal Stalin, I'm not defeatist, nor concede defeat from a great motherland to those Nazi bastards. If in the end I have nothing but my bare hands, I will fight. If I have no more clothes and am freezing in the cold winter, I will fight. I am merely stating the facts that they have far superior technology. If you wish to shoot me and have us lose a great general that can save further lives from ending up under the Nazi boots, then shoot me here and now." Stalin leaned slightly back in awe and spoke. "Dear men, do you see? Bravo! This is what I want to hear from all my generals. The Russian bear is still alive and will fight to the bitter end and will win. General Zhukov, I'm promoting you now to Field Marshal, and you shall have more men to your disposal. Anything else you wish to fight back, the German invaders. And Beria, do not think for a moment that Field Marshal Zhukov is to be shot as a counter-revolutionary." A small smile and yet shock came over the generals and the officers in the room, seeing for once the dreaded right-hand man of Stalin shrink into shame. July 9th, Operation Typhoon, the Battle of Moscow. At 03 a.m. July 9th, the German armed forces launches Operation Typhoon, the mission to capture the capital of the Soviet Union, Moscow. On the night between July the 9th and 10th, Stalin leaves Moscow to a nearby awaiting airplane and flies away to Yekaterinburg. As Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union, has finally fallen to the Germans, it is discovered from interrogations that Stalin and his chain of command left Moscow last night. Upon finding out about this, Hitler speaks to Goebbels and several other high-ranking Nazis about the great victory in the most famous line of the war. So, finally the beast from the east has fled like a rat. With victory in Moscow, the German forces moves towards Leningrad and capture it on July the 25th. Upon establishing foothold in Moscow and Leningrad, the military of the Reich pushes them forward, down to the south, towards Kiev. The fate of the encircled Soviet armies was sealed. With no mobile forces or supreme commander left, there was no possibility to break out or counterattack. The advancing German 17th Army and 6th Army of Army Group South arrived along with the 2nd Army. The encircled Soviet armies at Kiev fought back hard with everything they had. By the night between July the 25th and 26th, Kiev finally falls to the advancing superior German armed forces. Realizing that the next target for the German forces would be the Caucasus and the city of Stalingrad, Stalin orders a massive force to be stationed in the city that bears his name. After the victory in Kiev, the German forces pushes their way through the Ukrainian fields and on forwards toward the Stalingrad and the Caucasus region. August 1st, Ohrdruf test site, northern Germany. The Reich successfully tests the first atomic bomb. A military officer carrying a black briefcase along with two others arrives shortly after at the Führer Chancellery. As the three men enter, they stop and salute. Hitler looks up towards them. The three men walks up to Hitler and hands him a piece of paper regarding the newly successful test. As Hitler reads it, he begins to joyfully smile, puts the paper down to the table, stands up, rubs his hands, and looks back up at the three military officers, and says, "At last, we have it." With the Battle of Stalingrad almost won, totally in control of the German forces led by von Paulus, Hitler orders for the final push to capture the remaining parts, but not to cross the Volga River. On the same day, General von Paulus orders all forces inside the city to storm and take out the last Soviet armed positions. As the German armed forces, spearheaded by SS forces, stormed the final Soviet positions, the Soviets launched a final counterattack, ending within less than 15 minutes, with a total domination by the German ground and air superiority. Finally, the order came true, not to cross the Volga, where another 2 million Soviet soldiers awaited them, dug deep into the ground as they had created a massive bunker and trench system as a final resort in case Stalingrad were to fall. Confused by the order, von Paulus complies and completely orders a halt of his forces. At 11 p.m. that same day, a V-4 rocket armed with a nuclear bomb is dropped across the other side of Stalingrad, across the other side of the Volga River, upon the 2 million strong Soviet forces. As the bomb hits, a terrible, powerful light explodes and blinds everyone, followed by a powerful shockwave. As the blinding light had settled and the shockwave had passed, the German forces looked up in shock and awe at the rising, burning mushroom cloud from across the Volga. One German corporal screamed out to one of his fellow comrades and said, "Mein Gott in heaven, what was that?" As the dust had settled and the mushroom cloud evaporated, General Friedrich von Paulus of the 6th German Army called directly back to Army HQ in Berlin, where the Führer Hitler was and had seen from the live satellite imagery what had transpired, and spoke. "General Paulus, report," von Paulus replied. "My Führer, it appears that the Soviets across the other side of the Volga have been annihilated by a powerful bomb. Is this the reason you ordered the 6th Army from not continue forward?" "Not just a powerful bomb, Herr General, but an atomic one. We now have the complete superiority over the Soviets. They have but no chance but to surrender. I am promoting you now from this great victory to Field Marshal. Carry on and push forward towards the Ural Mountains, Field Marshal Paulus." "Jawohl, mein Führer. Vielen Dank, mein Führer." "Yes, my Führer. Thank you, my Führer," von Paulus said. As the Führer hung up, General Erich von Manstein looked up at him, seeing the newly elected Field Marshal in a slight shock, and asked, "What is it? What did the Führer say?" Von Paulus replied, "We now have the atomic bomb, Herr General, and I am from now a Field Marshal." The news of the atomic bomb reaches the world. Winston Churchill is in a secret meeting with the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the White House Oval Office, when an intelligence officer enters the room. "Mr. President, we've just been informed by our operatives on the Eastern Front that the Germans have dropped an atomic bomb over the city of Stalingrad." "My God," said Roosevelt. "So, they finally did it. Hitler will finally win this war after all," said Churchill. In less than 2 weeks, all of the Caucasus except for the city of Baku falls to the Reich. 2 days later, Baku finally falls. August 11th, 0600 a.m., New Mexico, USA. Through the secret weapons program called the Manhattan Project, the United States successfully test drops its first atomic bomb in White Sands, New Mexico. On August 25th, 2 stronger atomic bombs are dropped by V-4 missiles by the Reich over the Soviet cities of Chelyabinsk and Yekaterinburg. Having retreated to Yekaterinburg with his entire command staff, Stalin and everyone else in the city are killed in the blast. A report of 2 massive explosions by the atomic bombs reaches the Allied command in Washington, D.C. Later, that same day, the remaining Soviet military command dispatches a military unit under white flag toward the nearest German-Soviet front, where a message Message is handed over to the field marshal from Paris. The answer is total surrender and capitulation by the Soviet Union to the Reich. Taking advantage of this, the Empire of Japan launched an invasion of the remaining Soviet Union. Hitler promises to assist the Japanese in their war effort in Asia and the Pacific. January 13th. A massive wave of stealth fighter jets, intercontinental jet bombers, V-4 rockets carrying nuclear weapons are launched 0600 AM Berlin time across the entire Ural Mountains, Siberia, Middle East, Africa, parts of Western India and China onto designated targets and wipes out hundreds of millions of people. Nuclear-armed V-4 rockets using stealth technology are dropped over Midway Naval and Air Base in the Pacific Ocean, San Francisco, California, Honolulu, Hawaii, and Norfolk Naval Base. A secretly created defense shield is launched across North America, which shoots down one intercontinental jet bomber from dropping a nuclear bomb onto New York City. Hitler finds out about this and holds off further attacks on America. An hour later, Washington delivers a telegram with a peace proposal to Berlin, where the US promises not to launch any further attacks against the Axis forces, not to interfere in South America, and retreat from the Pacific campaign. Joyfully, Hitler agrees an hour later. Hitler sends Goebbels, Goering, Rommel and Sepp Dietrich to Washington, D.C. in a specialized plane directly onto the front lawn of the White House, where Franklin Delano Roosevelt awaits them with deep anger and sorrow. The Nazi entourage arrives the same day at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. At 12:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the US President speaks directly to the nation about the now signed peace treaty. My fellow Americans, today the representatives of the Third Reich came to our nation's capital. We re-signed a treaty between our two great nations, a treaty of peace, to prevent any further American bloodshed and any further atomic bombs to be dropped onto our soil by a far superior nation. I therefore concluded that the only choice was peace itself. As of this morning at 11:23 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the United States and Germany are no longer at war. In this treaty, America promises to withdraw from the Allied war effort in any shape whatsoever, not to interfere in South America, and completely retreat from the Pacific theater. May this peace last forever. May we see no more weapons of mass destruction dropped over our nation. May our nation stay free and democratic. May God bless this peace treaty and the United States of America. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister Churchill orders the remaining Allied forces across the globe to fight on in a powerful speech over an international broadcast from Toronto, Canada. Fellow citizens of the British Empire, Commonwealth nations and occupied Europe, this is Prime Minister Winston Churchill speaking. I am broadcasting live from Toronto, Canada, where I and the entire royal family have successfully escaped. Hitler, if you are listening, you may have won this battle, but you will lose this war, for when your hubris and megalomaniacal aspirations of world conquest have already failed, for you are despised by all that you and your fellow Nazis have done to them. My fellow countrymen, if you are listening, stay strong and fight with any means possible, Do not yield, do not falter, do not surrender, for this is just the beginning of the end of Hitler and his Nazis. To all oppressed people across Europe, I say to you, fight back, fight and fight again until the final day of victory has come, which will surely be sooner than later.